morning and welcome to the Asian Refining Technology Conference Digital. We're absolutely delighted to have you here with us today for the morning session. I'm Natalie Chu, editorial and project lead for this year's Asian Downstream Summit, and it's my pleasure to be your host for today. In today's session, we're taking a look at ESG projects and implementation with pertinent topics that include transparency in the industry, the ability to produce lower carbon intensity products, going from carbon neutral to carbon negative, and the challenges in implementing sustainability and ESG initiatives. So we'll be examining these themes today with a fireside chat together with our speaker, Harsha Reddy, Vice President and Global Head of Sustainability Development from Indorama Ventures. I'd like to invite Harsha to turn on your camera and microphone, please. Hi, Harsha. Good morning.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Hi, Natalie.
So for our attendees, during the session today, you may feel free to ask questions by typing into the chat box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. We'll be sure to pose these questions to Harsha, time permitting, of course. So without further ado, let's get into the session proper. So to start off, welcome again, Harsha. Maybe let's have an introduction to yourself, as well as what you do at Indorama Ventures.
Yeah, myself, Harsha Reddy, Vice President and Global Head of Sustainability Development. Have been with Indorama Ventures for the last 15 years, driving sustainability efforts from corporate office, working very closely with the Board of Directors, a subcommittee of the board, which we call Sustainability and Risk Management Committee, which drives the sustainability agenda from corporate office. This function includes setting up sustainability strategy, framework, targets, commitments, and the roadmap across all IVL entities. So from setting up all these things to cascading down to all business operations and ensuring that whatever the strategies are developed, whatever the targets are set up, all these things should be deployed across IVL entities. IVL is a global chemical company having operations in 35 countries with 147 manufacturing sites. That is the complexity that we have within IVL operations. For the last financial year, our revenue was 18.7 billion USD. We have three core business segments: combined PET, fibers, integrated oxides, and derivatives. So you can imagine the complexity in driving the sustainability across IVL operations, and this function, along with my colleagues, part of the corporate sustainability team, and also the sustainability champions at various business segments, the plant level. Together, we are driving the sustainability agenda across IVL.
I see. Thank you very much for sharing that. So in looking at your job scope and with Indorama Ventures itself, where would you place yourself on this carbon roadmap?
This is a position which has to work very closely, as I mentioned, with the senior leadership. That includes executive presidents, executive directors, CTOs, and other senior leaders. That what we set up these targets, commitments, framework, we will cascade down. So this function has to work with both the senior leadership and the businesses. We need to look at our work very closely with the business leaders to understand what are the complexities within operations. What are the hotspots in carbon footprint? Work with various technology providers to understand what are the solutions that we can bring in to decarbonize our operations. So it's a global function working with all IVL entities across.
Okay, so looking at today's topic, we're speaking about the petrochemicals industry in general. So in talking about achieving a lower carbon intensity of products, what strategies do you think the industry can or should employ? We're also talking about the leveraging of technologies like carbon capture to reduce carbon emissions.
That's a big challenge for everyone today, I would say. We all know science is real. We have been seeing the natural disasters across the world. Every day there is some news, somewhere something is happening. So this proves that the science is real and the natural calamities are going to happen, if we don't mitigate the climate risks, if we don't reduce or keep the global warming potential to 1.5 degrees. To achieve this, there is significant role a corporate can play, a business, a manufacturing industry can play. It has to decarbonize its operations. To decarbonize its operations, there are several strategies a company can adopt. First thing, it can look into its own operations. Where are the hotspots? What are the high energy consuming operations or equipments? How we can leverage the technologies. These things we should look at within our company's operations that we are doing within IVL operations to enhance our own operational efficiency. Then the other aspect is looking outside. Whatever we do in this to reduce our carbon footprint or decarbonize our operations, there is some limitation. You can't produce a product without consuming energy, fuel, or electricity. When we consume all these utilities, fuel, energy, there will be some emissions. So how do we capture that carbon footprint? So there are technologies that are evolving. That could be carbon capturing. What do we do with the captured carbon? Sequester under the ground. By doing so, it is the cost for capturing the carbon and also sequestering, storing under the ground. It would be very good if this captured carbon can be converted into a product, whether it is fuel, chemical, minerals, or some other products. So that is one way which the world is looking at. That's a big technological advancement where everyone is looking at, including IVL. We have been working with the technology providers in some of our operations, especially in the US. Now, that's one way. The second, the third or other option is to look at your energy consumption. Move from conventional energy consumption to renewable energy. Most importantly, renewable electricity. For renewable electricity, it could be a two-pronged approach, especially that IVL is adopting. One is on-site renewable electricity. We are trying to install solar panels on our rooftops, ground mounting, and also floating solar panels. But for a manufacturing company, there is a limitation. How much, whatever we do, this on-site solar renewable electricity, it could be 5 to 10% of our operations. But the substantial portion that we could get is through power purchase agreements. These power purchase agreements could be direct power purchase agreements or virtual power purchase agreements. So we are working with the consultants and developers to procure this renewable electricity through virtual power purchase agreements. So with this VPPS, there is a scope for IVL and also likewise other organizations to convert conventional electricity into renewable electricity. By doing so, we can reduce a substantial portion of our scope 2 emissions. The other option for decarbonization, reducing carbon footprint is engaging with value chain partners. Look at our suppliers, look at our customers, engage with our suppliers to understand what are their operations, where are they consuming high energy, where are they emitting high emissions, identify the hotspots, work with the suppliers. There are multiple ways of engaging with suppliers. One is direct engagement with the suppliers, that is always better. And also there are intermediaries or third parties which assess suppliers and give the scorecards and assessment reports. Likewise, we can collaborate with our customers to understand what are their expectations, what are their requirements. Just to mention one important point. Today, we are dealing with industry leaders, customers, suppliers, they all set their high ambition, sustainability ambitions, whether it is net zero targets, science-based targets. Since majority portion of the carbon footprint comes from the product that they purchase, that means upstream. When it comes to our customers, majority of carbon footprint comes from the product that they purchase from us. Likewise, the product that we purchase from our suppliers. So it is essential for all the entire value chain partners to collaborate and see how a product can be made with low carbon footprint. Also, whatever we do, there could be some residual carbon footprint that can be offset through natural capital solutions, carbon credits, whether it could be voluntary carbon market or other means. So these are all few areas by which organization can decarbonize. Maybe another point is to look at our own operations and also value chain to see if there are any coal-based operations. That is one and the best way to decarbonize. In IVL, we have coal-based operations in the Asian region. So we have a target to reduce, we have a target to phase out coal by 2030. Likewise, we set various other targets to reduce carbon footprint by 30% by 2030, renewable electricity, energy, water, etc. So these are all some means of reducing carbon footprint or decarbonizing the value chain.
I see. Thank you very much for sharing that. I just wanted to kind of follow up on some of the points that you've made. And I think you talked about, conversion of carbon into other products and looking at reducing energy consumption as a whole by introducing newer technologies, more innovative technologies such as solar panels and, to have your floating solar panels as well, right? But I think in terms of technology like this, one challenge that always remains is that, the feasibility of these technologies for current process systems to look at it in a simpler manner in terms of the cost, in terms of having to retrofit it to perhaps older systems. So how would you go about navigating this challenge?
That's a big challenge for everyone, including IVL. The cost is a major factor. CapEx for this decarbonization operations is huge. Having said that, it is imperative. It's a business imperative for organizations to still go for sustainability initiatives, decarbonizing, whatever is the carbon footprint, whatever the means, etc. This reminds me a quote which Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, has mentioned. Will you lead or will you be led? So will you lead or will you be led? As I said, it is a business imperative for any organization. If you look at the cost at this moment, then you will be forced to take initiatives at a later date. Also, one well-said statement. The cost of inaction will be much more than the cost of action. So companies need to look at what are the cost aspects, what are the technologies available. It may not be available immediately, this carbon capturing, as you rightly mentioned, it is high cost effective. Maybe there are some other solutions like US, there are some tax credits, Inflation Reduction Act. Likewise, Europe, there are some tax rebates and other financial incentives which can help to lower the cost of these technologies. Of course, carbon capture is something which is prevalent at a lab scale, but at a commercial scale, still it is not well proven. In IVL, we are working with the technology providers for carbon capturing, just to repeat that point. And hopefully we will go with at least one such project in the near future. And once it is commercially proven and feasible, we can expand it to other operations. That's the one big solution that can help to decarbonize in a substantial portion. Other solutions will help, but carbon capturing is one such thing. In addition to that, maybe other solutions one could look at is bio-based energy, biomass consumption. There is one technology or the methodology that we can say bioenergy with carbon capture. So use biomass as a fuel, but whatever the emissions that are emitted from this process, if there is a carbon capture technology, so that could be one of the best solution. And also look at a natural or bio-based feedstock. Sometimes bio-based feedstock would have a low carbon footprint than natural or fossil fuel-based raw materials. So these are all some of the technologies and the cost capex challenges the world is facing. But I'm very much optimistic of the solutions would come and would be available for many of the industries, even small-scale industries as well.
Of course, of course. And I think it's very interesting that you shared, the opinion that it's imperative for businesses to make this shift because, as you said, the cost of inaction would be higher than the cost of action itself because you're still going to have to implement these. It's just a matter of now versus later. Um, in your opinion, how can transparency in the industry help to support the integration of these technologies? Because I think it comes down to a question of accountability when it comes to, say, one organization holding itself accountable versus holding the rest of the industry accountable. Do you think there'll be a difference in this kind of perspective?
Yeah, transparency is going to play a big role. We have been listening greenwashing, green claims. That leads to the loss of trust by our customers, consumers, industry. So transparency is important element in what a company is doing. That transparency can be brought in through various means. I would like to quote what Mahatma Gandhi, the freedom fighter of India, has said. Say what you do. So that leads a company to report what the companies are doing and also what they intend to do. This could be various means: sustainability reporting through website, direct communication to customers, investors, suppliers, and these are all the means of various channels of communicating or being transparent. So the trust is very important in this element to avoid greenwashing. Otherwise, we have been seeing several claims where they claim the products are 100% carbon neutral, 100% carbon negative, or even they're claiming carbon negative, and all those things. I don't mean they are not achieving it, but it should be supported by some evidence so that whoever has the kind of question, is it genuine, is it right, then the evidence, the information, the transparency will help them to cross-check the claims made by those companies. Sorry, what is the other point you mentioned?
I think what I mentioned was also about, say, an organization holding itself individually accountable versus, say, a larger picture where everyone else in the same industry is looking out at what one another is doing.
It is both. Certainly, an organization should be accountable for whatever it is doing and whatever it is reporting for its actions, inactions, etc. And also, it's, as I said, it's a collective action. Sustainability is not something which can be achieved by just one single party. As I have been repeatedly mentioning, it's a value chain collaboration between the suppliers, the manufacturers, and their customers, including the consumers. It's the complete loop wherein government, regulatory bodies, etc., will play their role. Everybody has to be part of it together in achieving it. If you just rely that my supply chain, my carbon footprint is coming from upstream, as I said, the products that we supply to customers are likewise with any customers. Most of the raw material, most of the carbon footprint comes from raw material and it lies in the upstream. And if a player is just looking at upstream to decarbonize, that is not going to happen. So every player in this value chain has to play to achieve the sustainability objectives, and they have a role to play.
I see. Okay, thank you very much for expanding on that, actually. So can you provide any examples or maybe a case study or an anecdote for how Indorama Ventures has reduced carbon emissions through advanced technologies, for example, using carbon capture technologies, and any key takeaways or things that you've learned specifically from these examples?
Several initiatives have been organized our operations. To repeat a couple of points, carbon capturing, we haven't done yet potential scale. Having said that, a couple of operations capture the carbon, and that the carbon is purified and supplied to our customers to use in their products, especially one example is in the beverage companies where they use purified carbon. That's one example that is done at some of the entities in IVL. But we are also exploring to capture the carbon in substantial quantities with the technologies providers. Our intention is to, more than storing this captured carbon, our intention is to convert that product into a valuable product that goes into, that can be a chemical, that can be a feedstock for our own operations, like CO2 to MEG, ethylene glycol, ethylene oxide, those kind of chemicals that becomes a feedstock for us, or products that can be converted into carbonate that goes into EV vehicle batteries or other products. So those are all some of the examples with respect to carbon capturing. We are also working on operational efficiency. We kickstarted one important initiative a few years back to identify what are the green initiatives that we can undertake. So we asked all IVL entities to look at their operations and come up with some projects where they can help those operations to reduce their carbon footprint. Whether it could be energy, whether it could be emissions, whether it could be water, raw materials, or any other utilities. So every IVL entity came up with several projects. We monitored those projects, prioritized based on various parameters, embedded ESG principles, especially environmental principles, into CapEx investments in addition to payback. That also includes guidelines from corporate decarbonization SOPs, where we introduced internal carbon pricing. We said entity can look at their project, adopt internal carbon price of $20, where there is no emission trading scheme. Some IVL entities are subject to emission trading scheme, where the carbon price is much higher, over 70, 80 euros, or even it touched up to 100 euros. So those entities can use the actual carbon price that they are paying. So with these, all this means they came up with several projects, and we are identifying which are the suitable projects. And we already initiated some projects to reduce the carbon footprint, and working continuously, we are working with the technology providers. We set up, in IVL, we have a systematic governance framework, from board of directors to a subcommittee of the board that I said, sustainability and risk management committee, executive president. We have each segment to group CTOs. Under group CTOs, we have regional and plant level CTOs. We set up a decarbonization subcommittee. The core objective, the core scope of work of this decarbonization subcommittee is to continuously explore the possibilities to decarbonize operations, work with the technology providers, etc. These are a few things, and renewable electricity, I said already, on-site renewable electricity, off-site renewable electricity procurement through power purchase agreements or virtual power purchase agreements. We explored even natural capital solutions, but it's not a short-term solution, but it's in a long-term solution to achieve our sustainability, our net zero ambition during the time frame of 2050 to 2070.
I see. Thank you for sharing that. I think at the end of the day, it's less to do with one solution fits all kind of mentality, but rather to say that smaller things that come together, essentially help to shift that needle from carbon neutrality to hopefully carbon to a carbon negative point. We've got some questions from the audience. So starting with this one, someone has asked, how do you justify and prioritize your investment towards ESG projects against other asset sustainment projects? So rather, how do you compare the value of the various CapEx and OpEx projects and decide which one to move forward on?
Yeah, partially I covered this point in my previous point. Certainly, we need to look at the project's overall project scope, embed ESG principles into CapEx investment decisions. The gone are the days. Earlier, the motive of every organization was how to make profit. Now, we have a purpose statement, profit with purpose. A business without purpose, just making profit, will not survive in the long term. And we have ambition. We are sustainability leaders. And we have the big responsibility to lead this, and also meeting the expectations of value chain partners, whether it is customers, suppliers, or others. So in IVL, any project while making investment decision, capex decision, we look at along with economics of the project, what is the payback, etc. The management also looks at what are the environmental parameters or environmental benefits, reductions that this initiative or project can bring in. Will it reduce carbon footprint? Will it reduce energy consumption? Will it reduce raw material, water, etc.? In addition to all these parameters, we also look at what is the per dollar carbon footprint reduction. These are all some of the things that we initiate in IVL to integrate this investment decisions. And of course, this is not something easy. It's easy to say, but implementation is too critical and too complex. Not every project we can look at just from economic perspective. And always, like as I said, either you will be leading or you will be led by others. If you don't take actions now, certainly that's going to play a bigger role in the long term.
Right. So the next question that we have is, well, how do you measure your Scope 3 emissions, and how do you recommend reducing it?
Scope 3 emissions is one of the biggest or the complex process for any organization. Scope 1 and 2, it's easy. I would not say easy. It's also complex, but compared to Scope 3, it is relatively better. It's under our operational control. We can calculate what is the electricity consumed, what are the water units consumed, etc. We can measure and do the calculation of Scope 1 and 2. For Scope 3 accounting, which we initiated a couple of years ago, now we are much more matured. Scope 1 and 2, we are quite matured and have robust system in place. So we are using sustainability software to capture all the consumptions at every IVL entity, produce the reports, dashboards at entity level, segment level, IVL level. Now we moved our progressed ourselves into Scope 3 accounting. So with the help of this sustainability software, now we started capturing Scope 3 out of 15 categories, around 9 categories we are calculating the Scope 3 emissions. That includes emissions from raw materials, business travel, upstream transportation, downstream transportation, emissions from use phase of our products. These are all some of the categories that we started calculating. What we have done to do this Scope 3 accounting is, one is for raw material emissions calculations, which is a bit complex. Today, it's a dual process. One is, what are the raw materials that we are consuming? We have that information. Against each raw material, what is the carbon footprint? It has a dual approach. You get the carbon footprint directly from your supplier. That is the one best means of doing it. But that is not, the industry is not matured enough. The suppliers are not doing their carbon footprint accounting. Of course, big players are doing it, but there are several SMEs and even big companies are not able to provide that data. So what the companies and what IVL is doing is get the data, the emission factor from external database. So the carbon, the raw material multiplied by the carbon footprint. So emission factor is the carbon footprint for the raw material. If I say out of 100% carbon footprint credited to our factory gate, Scope 1 and 2 would be around 20 to 25%. Scope 3 would be around 75%, 70+% of total carbon footprint. Out of this Scope 3 carbon footprint, majority is coming from raw materials, which again amounts to say approximately 70%. So if we can tackle Scope 3 emissions from raw materials, we will be able to reduce substantial carbon footprint. That's where we are working on. We are engaging with our suppliers directly. We are reaching out to them. We organized several webinars to educate our suppliers. Some suppliers are quite advanced, but there are several suppliers still they need to understand what's the importance of sustainability. Why IVL is paying a lot of focus on sustainability. What if our suppliers, what if the customers, or what if the value chain partners will do not focus on sustainability? What are the consequences they are going to face in the future? So encouraging everybody to move towards this sustainability, carbon footprint accounting, and all these things are being done. This is one way we are encouraging our suppliers. And also we are using third party. We became a member of TFS along with other 47 chemical companies. We are using TFS platform, EcoVadis platform to assess our suppliers. That will help us to account this, to calculate the carbon footprint from our suppliers' products that they supply to us. So these are all some of the means that IVL has adopted in calculating Scope 3 carbon footprint. And of course, I would say we are still, it's a long way. We need to advance more and more in doing this process.
Absolutely. And I think this really ties back into the earlier point of, the accountability and making sure that everyone in the industry is equally accountable for the sustainability drive that we all have to embark on. So I just want to ask as well, someone sent in a question that does tie into something I do want to pose to you. So what are your thoughts when it comes to something like digitalizations and digital operations in IVL with achieving sustainability goals? Where do you see digitalization fit into achieving sustainability goals?
Digital technologies are going to play a bigger role, undoubtedly.
Mm.
How they can help us is, say, technologies earlier, whatever the machineries that are 10 years old against the machineries latest technologies, with the latest technologies of current generation, there is a lot of difference between the electricity consumption. If you take any appliance at your home, whether it is refrigerator or TV or anything, 10 years old appliance versus new generation current appliances, there is a lot of difference in the electricity consumption or other consumptions. Likewise, in a manufacturing industry, there are several machineries, equipments. Of course, it is not possible to replace every old equipment with the new equipment and see that you can reduce your carbon footprint. It's a decision that has to be taken wisely. What is best, and all those parameters should be included. This is one area. And when it comes to sustainability factors, in addition to what I mentioned, we also need to capture the data from every manufacturing entity. It is not, the process is not something easy. And also it is labor intensive, or a lot of man hours are included. If we can digitalize, maybe through sensors, if that sensors or meters, if they can help to capture the data at the use phase and transfer that data into the system. So that will help to eliminate human intervention in looking at the meters, what are the consumptions, and reporting that information into the system. So these digital technologies can help to automate that process and reduce or help improving the accuracy as well. So this is one way. But having said that, it is not something easy to install sensor in a manufacturing plant. You can imagine in a petrochemical industry, there are so many equipments, thousands of equipments, and installing those sensors, it is cost effective. It's not that easy in terms of capex. Then this process, digital technologies today, if you look at the downstream, our customers are looking at what is the carbon footprint for the product that we supply to our customer. A manufacturing entity could be producing more than one product, sometimes even hundreds of products. To calculate the product carbon footprint at product level, you need to look at the entire the utilities, that consumption, electricity consumption, and divide that into each product wise. It's mammoth exercise, not possible. So the digital solutions can help to capture the information at product or manufacturing level, which is pertaining to that particular product. With the help of those technologies, we can calculate the product carbon information, which our customers are looking, where we can identify hotspot, which equipment is high carbon intensive, high energy intensive. Maybe we can take initiatives to look at that particular equipment, machinery to reduce its consumption of water, electricity, or anything. So digital is going to play a bigger role more and more. That is the next era or generation where it has a bigger role.
I see. Thank you very much for sharing that. So I think that, as you said, it comes back to the cost effectiveness of the solution that you want to implement. But I think there's also a point to be made in terms of, well, the accuracy of what exactly you want to measure versus, how exactly you can then refine and, make, how do I say this? It's really come to a point of refining what exactly you want to achieve in terms of sustainability. Is it are you trying to just cut down on your emissions? Are you trying to, work with the rest of the supply chain, and how exactly you're going to hit these hotspots, as you yourself have mentioned? Let's look at a slightly larger scale. So we talked about the supply chain, but also in terms of, say, government regulatory and policies that have been, introduced, how can we restructure these frameworks in order to, well, number one, incentivize transparency across the board, and number two, prioritize ESG initiatives? So what kind of refinements or restructuring do you think we should introduce in these frameworks?
You mean to say in terms of regulatory frameworks?
Yes.
Regulatory framework has a bigger role that it has to play. It has been playing in some parts of the world. We can see, if you look at Asia, Europe, Americas, we can see the difference in the regulatory framework. While some are quite advanced, like Europe, they have quite ambitious targets, fit for 55 net zero ambitions. So they have introduced emission trading schemes, and they are coming up with a CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism, and all those things. It is quite advanced, and that's going to play a bigger role in decarbonizing the operations, the products production. Either you reduce your emissions or you pay for not doing or not reducing your emissions. That is clear and straightforward. And these regulatory frameworks, every jurisdiction has to come up. We see more advancements in Asia also, like such as India. They came up with some regulations where top 1,000 listed companies are supposed to produce or prepare sustainability reports. So that obviously will be expanded to more and more companies in due course. Likewise, every country has to come up with a regulatory guidelines. Like we know every country has given commitments as part of COP21 and other further frameworks to NDCs to reduce carbon footprint by 30%, 40%, 50%, whatever, 60% or even more, to be net zero or carbon neutral by 2050, 2060, 2070. How do they achieve their respective country targets unless they ensure that various players within the country are decarbonizing, and the manufacturing sector or the industries are the one which have to play a bigger role. So regulatory framework has to come up at every place, and that could be in multiple means, whether it is ETS, carbon pricing, or such as the CBAM, etc.
I see. But I think even in terms of, say, the regulatory frameworks or the policies that are being introduced, these also have to take into account various unique challenges of the geographical territories that they represent. For example, if we talk about Asia versus Europe, we see that Asia is by and large, we are moving towards a more sustainable industry, but at the same time, you have to admit it's a slower pace as compared to the Western counterparts. So, what are your opinions on this?
Yeah, of course, Asia is, as we see, it is not up to the level of Europe and Americas or North America. Certainly, there are many ways this Asia can come up for enhancing this regulatory framework. Maybe I missed the point that you asked. Can you repeat that?
Yes, I just wanted to ask in your opinion where, in terms of Asia, we're still trying to catch up to the same speed that Europe and America are embarking on.
Sorry, still, can you elaborate that point?
Yes, in the sense that, say, with these regulatories in the framework, right? Are we able to, well, do you think it's too ambitious, some of the policies that are being introduced? And, in terms of the expectations versus reality, do you think the industry is able to keep up to that pace?
Yeah, thanks for the additional clarification. Of course, these ambitions, the sustainability ambitions, the goals, targets that are set are quite ambitious. But there is no excuse for whatever is the reason, underdevelopment, or Asia is producing the products which the world needs, especially for Europe and the US. So Obviously, a lot of carbon footprint in Asia region because of the reason that they are producing the products for themselves and also for the rest of the world. And for Europe, it is maybe a little bit easy to comparatively to Asia to reduce the carbon footprint. But having said that, it is imperative for every region to come up with regulations to decarbonize. That could be through some schemes like Inflation Reduction Act, which US has introduced, Europe Green Deal. Likewise, Asia also should come up with some incentives. It's not just only the regulatory framework, but also it should be incentivizing the industry for taking initiatives. So these are all some of the things that can be deployed, in my view, to decarbonize more and more.
I see. Thank you. So I think just wrapping up, we're going to wrap up this discussion. So looking ahead, where do you think the future lies for ESG and sustainability for the industry? And how do you think we can continue to nurture a culture of improvement and innovation to tackle evolving ESG challenges?
Where the world lies at the business, as I said, it's a business imperative, sustainability. You do it now, sustaining the business. You don't do it, or you may be extinguishing from the market. We have seen several leaders once upon a time, big companies, they are world leaders. Today, we don't see them in the market for whatever reasons. Some of them could be sustainability and especially the innovation aspect. They do not see the importance of innovation, and they are out of the market today. Sustainability, once upon a time, it used to be a kind of nice to do thing, but it is no more. It is a must for every organization. So every organization has to think what is needed for the future. It is not that you just produce your products, you are selling in the market. Of course, there could be big demand, you are making profit, but that may not be in the future. The consumer perception is changing. A company has to change its mindset from stakeholder capitalism to shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. Gone are the days or gone are the decades where if a company is just making good profit and it can survive in the business. That's not the case. Unless our value chain partners, our customers, suppliers, employees, communities, if they're not prospering, a company will not prosper. The consumers are quite, they're wise, and they became more and more vigilant about companies' operations, companies' products, how are they produced. Today, or even in the future, there could be the technologies. When you search about a particular product or a company, there could be additional information beyond what they are looking at. What kind of company it is? Is it a low carbon intensive product? Is it low carbon intensive company? So there will be green tags along with the product information. If you search for some product, you will get only that information, but that comes with additional information for persons to make informed decisions, whether to buy that product, whether to engage with that company, whether to work with that company or invest in that company. Already there are some channels like Bloomberg, which is giving the ESG scorecard to all the companies, whatever they assess. One can look at, of course, investors are looking at already the Bloomberg platform, MSCI platform, DJSI, S&P's DJSI platform, Sustainalytics platform to look at the ESG initiatives undertaken by the companies, and they are taking calculated decisions or informed decisions where to invest. So it is imperative for the business to engage or embed sustainability culture into their operations. Do it now. That is the suggestion. There is no tomorrow to embed the sustainability culture and principles into business operations.
I think that's a very sobering way of looking at this, in the sense that for businesses, the choice is to evolve or to potentially lose out to the rest of the competition. So I think here, I think we've come to the end of the Q&A session. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Just, is there anything else that you want to share with all of us before we wrap up for today?
Yeah, I think I spoke enough, and I said I expressed my views. Again, maybe I'll be repeating the points. Companies need to embed sustainability principles as quickly as possible. before it is not too late. So cost of inaction would be much more than larger than cost of action today.
I see. Thank you very much, Harsha. And thank you as well to the audience for sending in your questions. Unfortunately, I think we've come to the end of our first session at ARTC Digital. So thank you once again, Harsha, for taking the time to speak with us. It's been a genuine pleasure getting to know your insights and opinions with regard to this topic today, especially pertaining to the petrochemicals industry. I think you've had a lot of experience that really, we have had the pleasure of getting to learn from. So if you have any other questions that we couldn't answer today, our audience members, please write to us directly and we'll be sure to connect you to Harsha for further discussion. So coming up, we'll be taking a short break for lunch, and in about an hour's time later at 1 p.m. Singapore time, we will resume for the second part of ARTC Digital, which will be addressing maintenance and OpEx, as well as achieving operational excellence in today's economic and environmental landscape. Have a good lunch break, and we'll see you at 1 o'clock.